Millions of people depend on the car industry for their living, but those jobs are not spread evenly across the map. They're concentrated in a handful of industrial clusters, places like northern Italy, Bavaria, or the outskirts of Shanghai, where one big factory decision can make or break an entire town. Today, I want to unpack what the EV shift really means for those workers, using the IEA report What Next for the Global Car Industry as the backdrop, and explain why, if Europe doesn't fix three things, scale, batteries, and skills, it risks losing this race. Imagine you work in a European engine plant. For decades, your skill has been machining precise metal parts, assembling complex systems, and living with the constant rhythm of just-in-time deliveries. Your entire world is built around the internal combustion engine: pistons, crankshafts, exhaust systems, fuel injection. Thousands of parts, every one of them a job for someone. Globally, the car industry directly employs well over 10 million people, and almost half of those jobs are in China and the European Union. These jobs are tightly clustered around a few regions because it's efficient to keep assembly plants, suppliers, and material producers close together. That clustering is great for productivity, but it's exactly what makes workers vulnerable. When a technology shift hits, it doesn't hit the world, it hits your town, your factory, your paycheck. Electrification changes what happens inside the factory in a very concrete way. An electric powertrain is simpler than an engine. Fewer moving parts, fewer machining steps, fewer fluids, fewer things to service. The traditional engine and transmission, which used to be the heart of the value chain in Europe and Japan, are gradually replaced by batteries, power electronics, and software. So the jobs don't just disappear, they move. They move from engine plants to battery plants, from mechanical machining to high-throughput, high-automation battery lines, from assembling complex engine components to managing electric drivetrains, electronics, and code. So, for workers, the real question is, where will those new jobs be located, and who will be qualified to take them? This is where the China rise matters, and to be honest, it's impressive. Over the past decade, China has quietly built a full EV ecosystem. It now holds a huge share of global car manufacturing capacity, has become the world's largest car exporter, and dominates battery production. In EVs specifically, China has reached scale in a way no one else has: massive domestic demand, dense supplier networks, and factories that have built millions of electric cars and learned from every unit. Behind those numbers is a deep employment story. Chinese clusters around cities like Shanghai don't just assemble cars, they host dozens of battery factories, cell suppliers, materials processors, and component makers. Instead of just protecting old engine jobs, China bet big on the new parts of the value chain: batteries, motors, electronics, and pulled labor into those activities. And this isn't only about cheap labor. China has invested heavily in manufacturing efficiency and automation. It installs huge numbers of industrial robots, scales up plants quickly, and uses learning by doing to drive down costs. That combination of scale, speed, and integration creates both competitive products and relatively resilient jobs in the new EV ecosystem. Europe's starting point is different. For decades, Europe's strength has been high-quality engineering, advanced diesel and gasoline engines, and strong brands. The region built entire towns around engine and transmission plants. In that world, more than 90% of the engine's value was often created domestically: local suppliers, local expertise, local jobs. But in an EV, the center of gravity shifts. The battery can account for a huge portion of the vehicle's value. In regions without a strong battery industry, as much as a quarter of that value effectively leaves the country in the form of imports. That is not just imported technology, it's exported employment. At the same time, Europe's overall car production has come under pressure. Output in some countries is still below pre-2019 levels, even as the global market continues to pivot toward EVs. Traditional export markets are more competitive, margins on internal combustion engines are squeezed, and there is less financial room to fund the transition by relying on comfortable ICE profits. So when I say that if Europe doesn't fix scale, batteries, and skills, it will lose, this is what I mean. First, scale and speed in EV production. Europe needs large, globally competitive EV plants, not just pilot projects. The IEA's analysis of economies like the EU and UK is clear. They fall into a regaining ground category, where the priority is to convert existing ICE facilities into world-class EV manufacturing sites and back that transformation with strong EV targets and consistent policy. For workers, this matters because a successfully retooled plant can preserve thousands of jobs, even if the tasks change. But if retooling is delayed, plants run below capacity, ICE volumes decline, and management eventually starts to talk about closures instead of conversions. Without scale, suppliers don't invest, local ecosystems erode, and the cluster begins to hollow out. Second, batteries, minerals, and energy costs. If Europe wants to keep high-quality auto jobs, it cannot afford to be a permanent importer of batteries. It has to build its own battery capacity and secure the materials that feed it. That means gigafactories, yes, but also skills, technicians who understand cell manufacturing, engineers who can design packs, and workers who can operate highly automated lines. It also means thinking strategically about critical minerals. Today, countries like China dominate refining of key inputs such as lithium and graphite. If Europe simply buys cells and materials on the open market, it stays exposed to price shocks and political risk. Building partnerships with resource-rich countries, investing in processing, and ramping up recycling aren't abstract green ideas, they're employment strategies. And underlying all of this is energy. Producing batteries, steel, and aluminum is electricity intensive. If European electricity is permanently more expensive than in competing regions, it becomes much harder to host those industries at scale. That again translates to fewer long-term industrial jobs. Third, skills, workers, and regional transitions. You can't talk seriously about millions of auto jobs without talking about people. Auto employment is heavily concentrated in certain regions, a valley in Spain, a belt in Germany, a town in the Czech Republic. When an engine plant shuts down or shrinks, the whole local economy feels it. A managed transition means retooling plants instead of abandoning them, giving workers real retraining pathways from engine assembly to battery and EV work, and supporting local communities while those changes happen. It means involving unions, local governments, and suppliers in a clear long-term plan rather than announcing closures at the last minute. An unmanaged transition, on the other hand, risks turning climate policy or EV policy into a synonym for job loss in specific towns. That is not just an economic problem, it's a political one. So what does all this mean if you're a worker, a student, or just someone living in an auto region? It means your future is tied less to the abstract idea of cars and more to where the new value will land in the EV supply chain. If battery plants, software teams, and power electronics factories open near existing clusters, there is a path to continuity. You may not be doing the same job in 10 years, but you might still be working in the same ecosystem. If those activities happen somewhere else or on another continent, the story becomes of decline. The EV shift is happening with or without Europe. China has shown what it looks like to move fast, align policy and industry, and build a full ecosystem around a new technology. I'm impressed by that achievement, and it sets a very high standard. For Europe, the choice is not between keeping ICE jobs and losing them to EVs. The choice is between actively shaping the transition by scaling EV production, building batteries at home, and investing in people, or watching the core of its car industry and the millions of jobs around it slowly erode. And in that sense, when we talk about the future of EVs, we're really talking about the future of work in entire regions.